Welcome to Playing With Inference. Before we get started today, I just wanted to take a moment to send a big congratulations to Ramon, who's one of our regular hosts, and his wife on the birth of their first child. You won't see Ramon for a few episodes as he's focusing on that, as he well should, but myself and Aaron are here to try and keep us going in his absence. In today's episode, we're going to go deeper on a common pitch around Gen AI coming to games, which is the idea of players and creators really being able to type in a prompt and get a custom game for themselves to play out of it. This has all sorts of interesting repercussions about personalization and UGC and what is game creation in the future and what do the tools to build it look like. There are definitely a lot of folks talking about and tinkering in this space.
And one of those folks who is here to join us is Jani Penttinen, CEO and co-founder of Bitmagic. Now, Jani's been a serial entrepreneur throughout his career. He got started at Remedy, Housemarque, and was also at Westwood Studios. Bitmagic started in 2023 and has one of the more engaging video of prompt to games that we've seen, and so we're really excited to talk about it. Bitmagic has been through a few iterations, and we're excited to learn what is next. So welcome, Jani.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and before we jump in, obviously, we always try and start with a bit of the introductions to ground things, but I'm wondering if you could just give a little bit more details of the story of you guys started in many ways around the same time we did, which was a very exciting first moments of ChatGPT 3 coming online, everyone trying to be like, hey, what can we do with this in games? And you took this approach of going towards prompt to game. And I'm curious, what led you towards that path and get started with Bitmagic? And what's that origin story?
Yeah, it's actually a very interesting story because we didn't mean to do what we're doing right now. We set out to build a role-playing game, a tabletop game, but online. That was just on the heels of COVID, where everybody was home and a lot of people missed out those chances to play games. So we figured that we're gonna build a game where one of the players is the game master. And in order for that to happen online, because you don't have a table in front of you, you need to be able to create those worlds really quickly. And whatever happens, you need to be able to modify them. And I'd heard of this GPT-3, which seemed pretty interesting way of, almost like a magical way of understanding what you say. And then you could translate that into a world. And the belief was at the time that you probably should be able to do something where I say I want there to be a room where there's a table there and all that, and then all of those things just magically happen. So we started building that, and the thing is, we did not have a license to Dungeons and Dragons, and I didn't know that, but it turns out that when you go pitch a game idea of role-playing game and you don't have a license to D&D, then people don't think you can make it. So we spent quite a lot of time like going through those investors. Everybody says the game is interesting, but probably too hard to sell. I don't think getting the audience to a role-playing game that is not a D&D hard, but the tech you built is really interesting. We kept hearing the same story, the disappointment that we were so excited about the game. That didn't go anywhere, but at the same time, the tech got like praise from like excitement from the investors and the publishers. So we just decided to just drop the game. If no one wants the game, screw the game. But we had already had a good time with the team. Like we had a good founding team. We felt that we want to do something. And what we are doing seems to be interesting to other people, and we are having fun doing it. So we just decided to try and see what would happen if we would completely pivot, start making a system that allows you to make any kind of game, not just role-playing game, just whatever. And that was an immediate breakthrough in terms of we were really quickly able to get some pre-seed funding and get going. And we are still on the same track. We were called Rollverse at the time because metaverse, role-playing games and all that didn't really sit so well with the new vision. So then we changed our name to be Bitmagic. And that's basically the origin story, which probably going to be in the big book that we will do after we are exit and all that. But yeah, now you have it.
Yeah, I think it's always, any startup journey is always very much has its twists and turns. And I think Discord is the most famous example of this. Of they were building a game, and along the way they found tech that was far more interesting, and they pivoted into that. And I think what's been fascinating for our own journey as well on this is you have to get your hands so dirty as we're learning this brand new space that you do end up building these really interesting bits of tech on your way to what you thought the game was, but then that changes because what you learned about the tech, and it's really this conversation rather than just build a straight path towards what you think the game will be.
Yeah, I think actually it should almost be mandatory to, when you start with a new team, like a new startup, you should do something. Just start building something. And then when you find what you want to do, then you pivot or you quit. It's a great way to get to know your co-founders and get to know whether you actually want to do something or not together. If this thing completely had failed, like I'm 100% sure the three of us, the core founders, we would have started something together. When you find the right people, then you just know it. It's okay, this works. Whatever we do, I want to do it with these guys. And that's something that it's good to know. When we pivoted to Bitmagic, at that point, it was good to know that I have a team of people that I want to do it with. So we didn't have to start by let's see if we can work together. Who can we hire and all that. So we got a very good start because we already had the team. And I think probably most companies, the story at the end is the same way, where they pivoted at some point, and maybe somebody left and all that. When you finally got the group together and then you finally got the idea, then it was not smooth sailing, but at least on the team wise, it was. So at least that's what happened with us.
If you were then to describe, because I'm familiar a bit with Bitmagic as you guys have come along, because again, Carl had said JMT and Bitmagic got some funding around the same time, actually have some shared investors and things. And so we bumped into each other. And so I followed along. But for those not as familiar, if we were to say what your vision of Bitmagic is now, if someone's going to anticipate when they download Bitmagic at some point or they try it out, like how would you describe what that vision is for what you're trying to make?
Yeah, so the vision has been from the get-go that it's a consumer product, first of all. We want to give the joy of game making to everybody. If you remember when TikTok came out and suddenly it was easy to make videos of just meme videos, it used to be complicated, but suddenly you had an app where you can just edit it and then publish it on the same platform. That's what we want. We want people to be able to, if you have an idea, you can create a game, put it out, and like making games is extremely difficult, has been always. And then once you get the game, you create a game in Unity or wherever, and then you need to put it out on Steam or somewhere. That's another difficult path. So we wanted to make this something where anyone can just make a game and put it out and have fun with friends. And so that the games could become more of a form of expression, not something that you have an idea and then maybe 3 years later you put it out to somewhere. And like the whole idea was that, well, now there is technology that makes it possible to make things quick, and not trying to go into the commercial AAA studio level. Just more bring it back to the indies and make the indie game making something that it was back in the 80s and 90s.
So Carl described one way he described this as the kind of prompt to game as a category of things that we hear from time to time, both either like people asking the question in the broader industry of, is this possible? When would it be possible? Sometimes I jokingly call it like you AI up a game or you vibe code up a game kind of thing. Do you feel is that a reasonable description of Bitmagic? Like, how does that overlap? How would you differentiate it to make a difference there? Because there's a lot that could be in that space, right? Vibe coding a game could be like, I take like cursor and I just make me a game, and it tries to make a game and you get a little airplane that crashes, right? Like, how does it compare in that category? Do you think you're part of that category or not?
Yeah, in a way, I think that's more like a technical description of like how it happens. We try to make it like, if you try Lovable or you try any of these other web coding platforms, you can make games with those, but it's actually quite difficult because they are not designed for games. So they lack the asset pipeline. They lack you can prompt, but the AI doesn't really have it doesn't understand the concept of what makes a good game.
Yeah,
that's the challenge. So it checks all the boxes, but the game is not fun. And that's the major problem with all the platforms out there that you can use for vibe coding.
Yeah, you're right about the asset part too. Like, they would not necessarily have I would assume, I've never even tried it with Lovable or something, but I would assume that you might have challenges getting the assets you want or loading them up or generating them or whatever you would do.
Yeah, I just last week I tried to make a platformer game with Lovable just to see how it compares with us. So
Right.
you type, I want to make a platformer.
Right.
It creates platforms, and then it creates like this like little square.
Right.
That's your character, and then there's other squares that are the coins that you need to pick up, and you can jump, you can move. It basically, technically, it is a platformer game, so it checks all those boxes. But then from there to an actual game, still a lot of work. And so we try to kind of let's do something that doesn't do business apps, or it
Right.
only does games, and it understands games, and trying to like provide a platform, like a framework that already provides the important stuff about gaming. So there's a character, the character is animated, there's a world, the world has physics. So stuff that you would have to start from scratch on all of these other platforms, because if it's not designed for games, then there's no sense that it would include any of those elements there.
Yeah.
But if you are doing a 3D game, then all those things always have to be there. You have to have physics, you have to have characters, you have to have all those things. So why not provide those and then make it easier for the AI to focus on the more narrow scope of doing the game logic. So it doesn't have to implement loading of assets or animating them or whatever else.
Right.
So that's, I think, the fundamental difference here. We're trying to just make it a super fun to make games, but nothing else. And that allows us we can take a lot of shortcuts. Like you don't need to be able to make any other type of
Right.
app with this. And then we can also justify having the asset pipeline as part of this thing, because every single game is going to have that.
I have so many questions, but I should make sure that Carl. This is always one of the things, so I should just.
I think just before, because where I imagine Aaron wants to go is, okay, let's dive into all of those little bits of those technical conversations and all the ways that we actually get into the weeds of it. Before we jump into that, because I am deeply interested, I think it's a very thoughtful way, and it's something that I've always been thinking about this space, is that so many of these companies are trying to make the app that can build anything, whereas we're just trying to make apps that are, or games that are just games, and we're not worried about, oh, can we make a game that also drives a car around San Francisco or whatever. But one of the things that I thought was really apt about how you were describing your vision was not necessarily about, we want to unlock the next great game studio or game tools or big game. We're trying to be very much in the vein of TikTok, of bringing the joy of making games to everyone, making it accessible, even if the actual games that they're going to go out and create are not going to be necessarily be masterpieces. That's not the point. The point is just to get someone hooked on that magic of, I made a game and I passed it around, I remember, this is going to date me, probably all of us. I remember when we would come up with a new game for the Recess Playground, and we would get so excited. Oh, I made up a new set of rules for Foursquare or Wall Ball or whatever, and it would go around the playground for a couple of months, and we'd be so excited. And then someone would come with a new rule set. And it's that sort of magic, that early magic of, oh, maybe I like making this form of entertainment even in this small way. And I thought that was really apt. I'm curious, from your perspective, like focusing on that experience versus making big games, like that sort of implies making TikTok sized games. If TikTok is a 30-second to 3-minute video versus YouTube they now do shorts as well, but like 10-minute, 15-minute video, right? Like, how do you think about that? Not necessarily bite-sized, but that scope of creation in game and how it helps you focus or not, right?
Yeah, like we keep going back and forth on what is the right scope, because I think if I make a game, let's ignore that I'm a professional game developer. Mm-hmm. I'm just somebody who likes games, and I make a game. I send it to my friend, and I say it takes 7 hours to play through. They're probably not going to even open it up. But if it's something that you can finish in a minute, then yeah, why not? So the scope is, I think, important for the audience as well. So that in order for you to build a good experience for creator, we need to build it somehow that people find these experiences engaging. Because let's face it, they're not necessarily going to be the masterpieces. We try to help as much as possible so that when you move around the world and all that would always feel great. But then the story and all that, I think it depends totally on how much work, how much effort did you actually put into it. So if you just prompt something quickly and want to share it, that should still be a good experience, but it shouldn't be something that drags along for a long time. I think my current thinking, and this keeps changing, is that you should be able to prompt a quick game if you want, but then if you want to start, those maybe 1% of all the creators who actually feel like, hey, you know what, I have an idea, I want to start tinkering here, we shouldn't have a limit on it. It shouldn't be forced to be any specific mini game. You should be able to build the next big whatever thing, spend like months on tinkering and adding storyline and all that. Why not? So we're not going to put any kind of physical limitations that would prevent you from doing that. Because I hope, I really hope that one day the next big legendary game is going to come out of this platform. At this point, initially, I hope somebody makes the next Fall Guys or something where it's just such a great novel idea that everybody's going to go crazy. But then at some point, I hope there will be pieces of art where it's just a great storytelling and great, somebody just put their heart into it. Nothing would make me happier than that. And I think it will happen when you have large enough number of people. I think if you take any UGC platform right now, say Roblox, it's less than 1% that make all the games that people play.
Right.
And then, so it's going to be you need to have a big funnel, so to speak. And then when you have enough people, you give everybody a chance, you will find those those people who really have it. And they don't necessarily know it because they might not be technical enough to have ever made games, and they maybe don't think they could do it. But once they have a chance, they might do it. And I always, one of my favorite examples about this is that if you look into the game industry right now, it's about a couple 100,000, mostly middle-aged men doing the games and sequels of sequels. And the game industry is very, very much the opposite of what our gaming audience is. The audience is diverse. Like people all over the world like to play games, but then the games are made by a very small group of people. So if you think that we would have equally diverse group of game developers, like anybody could do it, maybe we would start seeing ideas that have never been implemented, great new ideas. So that's the long-term goal, is that I hope this evolves into.
I have a personal reason to ask this question. I'll get to it. But you described at one point, you've used some analogies for Bitmagic and talking about TikTok, or in particular, we'll just use that example. And one of the features of TikTok, in addition to just making it very accessible, it has some remix features. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that aspect. And then I'll have a story time of my own actually on this concept. But I'm curious, what is that a thing that you see as important, not important, related?
I think it's very important. I do think we don't currently have that, but there's one big reason why I think it's going to be very important. And that's whenever we give this to people and we ask, okay, prompt any game you want, even if we could, even earlier, we couldn't do like everything, but we asked them to start by describing. Most people cannot write anything.
Right.
They freeze because I could write anything. I don't know. What do you think? Remixing is great innovation. It gives people a chance to take something that somebody else did, and then they have ideas how they would make it better. You start by that way, and then you learn your way into making your own. But you have to start somewhere, and the blank sheet is a scary place.
The reason I ask is my first startup, which was called Jade Tower, was based in Hong Kong, actually, in 2006 through 2010. And one of the things we were trying to do at the time, this was the time of flash games and very early mobile, is we took a lot of inspiration from Wikipedia and Creative Commons at the time. And we were thinking, oh, what if you could have this in-browser game engine? We're going to do 2D games. And really important, because my background is a lot in open source, was like, oh, we're going to like default to these be Creative Commons based. And so it would encourage this sort of remix culture that would happen. So it'd be like, oh, you create this game and then I'm going to make it almost like a Git clone of it for those. I'm going to fork it or make a change of it. And I might just put Carl's face on as the villain, and then it's okay. And then I send it over to him to be like, hi, whatever. And we were a little, I think, ahead of our time. Also, the 2010 financial crisis threw us for a loop, actually, to be very honest. But I think like today, that's so much more possible. And that idea of making it accessible, and particularly that's why I'm really glad to see that vision is continuing to be pursued in stuff like Bitmagic, where like making that accessible. And I really think, like, to your point, yes, you could make it so anyone could make a game. But I think, to your point, like a lot of people, what they're going to do is they're going to see one of those 1% games, and then they are going to take a version of it and put Carl's head on it and then just send it. There'll be a lot of those kind of fun things that can be happen. When people ask, like, why would I make another game? Sometimes it's because it's just a joke for you and your friends, right? Or it's a little variant, or you're like, what if I just change this one part? I'm curious. And most of the time it may not matter, and it might be just a simple little thing. Every now and then that might spin something else off. This is how modding has worked in the game community for a long time too.
Yeah, and it's, if you think that if you see a game that you like, you could just take a selfie of yourself and turn yourself into a game character.
Right.
That's one fun. Probably not going to go very viral unless if you're a celebrity. But then if you take somebody made a fighting game, and then you're like, oh, you know what? Let's change one to be a Trump and one Elon Musk. Suddenly there is some potential for that to go viral. And I think some people are going to start looking for these kind of things. What can I do to make it actually go viral? Like, what can I do to make... And there is a lot of possibilities there where I think some people are going to care about the gameplay and setting up things right. Others are just going to want to pick something that already works and make a meme version of that. All of those things should be possible. And I think like we do want to have a monetization option where if you create a game and it becomes popular, people play that, then we monetize that with ads or whatever we do. We share that with the creator. And then we need to figure out some kind of smart way to do that. So if somebody takes your game and remixes it, you still make some and they make some. And it starts getting like interesting, because then let's say they use Mickey Mouse as the character. Then we need to give a bunch of that money to Disney. And but I see like I'm only half joking, because I think that's where we are going to go. Like that's a different topic, but all the IP thing is going to play into this as well. And at some point, the IP owners are going to start to have to make deals with UGC platforms where if you want your IP to be relevant, it has to be possible to make fan fiction with it. And just the thought of sharing the revenue with the creators makes me think that there's a lot of people that want a share of that pie once the pie is big enough.
You think about what YouTube does, like Content ID and stuff like that for music and other ways. There are some models out there in this regard.
We're able to detect that there is some IP, but it sucks to block that. So I think at some point you will want to have, but it all goes in order. So let's say we become popular. There's a lot of people playing the games. Then we can go and say, knock on Disney's door and say, you know what? Just last year we blocked 1 million games. Wouldn't it be better if think of the monetization opportunity? When you are like too early on, that's not going to happen. But I think Roblox is probably going to get there at some point and make deals that allow people to take. Probably at first it's going to be pre-existing assets so that AI doesn't mess with them. But over time, all of that is going to go away. And there will be a time where you can just do the same way as you can currently do a YouTube video, and you can take any band's music as background music there. They used to block those, but then they did the smart thing, and now you can do anything, and they just pay the owner of the IP a compensation for that, which is obviously much, much better. Fans like that, the bands like that, like everybody wins.
Yeah. You already see that happening literally with Disney and Lego Group with UEFN, right? Like an Epic, right?
Exactly.
They look at that. And I know that other brands have absolutely done that same thing within Roblox, whether it's create their own experience or worked with other creators to get it in there. So I think it's, to your point, like I think we're more and more moving into an age where a brand will want to have representation and engagement from their fans in all the mediums it can, inclusive of interactive. And there is absolutely sort of a chicken and the egg of if you're not big enough, then when and where do you get those deals or deals that are favorable to you at the very least? But on the flip side, if you're small enough, maybe you stay under the radar of their lawyers for a bit.
Yeah, our stance right now is that like you can do whatever you want, but you can't share it with other people. So it's because you can draw up Mickey Mouse on your Photoshop, but you can't publish that. So we do want to, because I started by just hacking things. I started by making games on my own and doing things. That joy has to be there. You should be able to do whatever you want, and then it's completely different part where you actually put it out to the world. But at least the creation part should be fun, and like you should be able to do whatever you want, because the moment you start blocking those things, I was talking with an investor once and showing what we can do, and then she tried to do Hello Kitty, and yeah, there was a Hello Kitty character and she could move around there. She said that Apple had some sort of like an AI thing that you can type in and what kind of things you want to create, and her daughter tried to do Hello Kitty, and it responded, "No, sorry, I cannot do that." And then the daughter was just 3-year-old, just threw the phone away. That's not cool. That's not fun. That if you block all the known IPs, what is left there? Most people want to start by trying out something they already know. So this is very much like you said, the chicken and the egg. You have to start somewhere and you have to give the people the opportunity to create. But then the next thing is they want to start sharing those things, and then that's where it becomes a little...
Let's talk about assets just a bit more because we're on this topic. For Jam and Tea, we have explored some similar things. Some people have seen it. And one of the ways that we solved the initial problem is, so I want to talk about generative AI assets, right? So the way we have initially solved the problem is, one, we currently don't use generative AI art in our games. And also, if I want to procedurally generate a space, like I can just have a very big asset catalog that it can pull from and grab things. And those asset catalog can be pre-generated. I don't need to spend time or tokens to generate them. I can build a pretty big asset catalog. There's lots of ways to get the right items from the catalog. It can be high quality or whatever. And so that's the way we solve some of that problem. And I'm curious your take on it, because a couple of things I'm interested in. One is, when people ask me, why don't you just generate these on demand? I tend to have a couple answers. One is there's some ethical questions around using people's art and that. Two, it's expensive. It's slow. I don't think the quality is quite there. So maybe someday you'll be able to on demand in real time, someone's Hello Kitty or I want a sword, and it's automatically right now 3D generative AI up that mesh. But the reality is I can pre-generate or have artists do that. And to be honest, there's a lot of great art firms out there. It's not that expensive to build a very large art catalog from existing marketplace assets or from great artists. So I'm not saying that there isn't a place for Meshi or others in the future, but that's where I am right now. And I'm curious, if you want to talk about this, I'm very curious your take, because I'm sure you have thought about this.
Yes, I have. And our take is 180 degrees. So it's completely the opposite of yours. We started out by building a large catalog of assets by licensing assets. Like we licensed like 50,000 pieces of, so that you could do anything, like a whole bunch of like trees and houses and cars, like the whole thing. The problem is that very quickly you start seeing the same things in all these games, like even 50,000 assets. But then when you narrow it down, how many different types of houses do we have and all that? So really quickly, the game started to be a little bit repetitive. I was like, oh, I've seen that before, especially something that people wanted to do something very special. The asset catalog didn't have something. We wanted to have some very cool, whatever, space station. We might have 3 space stations. That was fine. We did that in the first version. Now, currently, for this year's version, we shifted around where we mostly focus on generating characters for you, and those are always generated. And we minimized the use of any kind of pre-generated assets in the worlds, in general, in the game designs. Then going forward, we're just completely going to ditch that effort. And it is a hybrid approach where we actually do generate. We don't use Meshi, but we have our own pipeline that creates the asset and rigs that and all that. And we've spent the whole year tweaking everything. And I think the quality-wise, we are pretty much there now, where I'm happy with what we can do, like in all the way to the animations. It's not always perfect, obviously, but you have to remember that these are people who probably don't know how to use Blender, so it's still much better. At the best, it's like really good, and at the worst, there are some glitches that kind of ruin the experience. But then you can drag it. That's one side. So all the like characters, props, something that collectibles, those kind of items are generated at the very high detail. And then for the world itself, it's, I don't know, we'll see what people are how they're gonna react. But we basically have AI do almost like a Lego block thing. Yeah. You say, I wanna go hunt a lion, and then the lion turns out to be a bunch of blocks that look like a lion, but they're not quite where we don't have a system that would create like a detailed lion and then rig a four-legged thing. So it's kind of, we're taking to the other extreme where it's just a lion-looking bunch of boxes, and then it's just a sliding around. Where it's like we highlight the fact that this is what it is. Because if it's almost there, but it sucks, that's bad.
Yeah.
But if it's collection of blocks and you slide it around, it's almost like you're playing with Legos. So we're trying to do that because AI is surprisingly capable of doing things.
It is. We have done some tests in that regard with basic primitives. I think folks, and NVIDIA did some tests last year that I think you can find some papers on. And I think it would surprises folks. So that's very interesting. Yeah.
So that's like where I am right now. And we've been going like this.
Yeah.
Like it's this the whole journey. And I think all the companies in this space are doing the same as we are. And you guys are like, we're trying to find out what is the right way to do. Because there isn't anything, we cannot really copy from anyone because no one's really solved this problem. No. So I'm not saying what we do right now is going to be the final solution, but that's where we are at right now. I feel like the game characters are super important. So I'm glad those we can generate, like whatever you want, take your own selfie or whatever. We can do those good. But then the world itself, I'm looking at Roblox because I love Roblox, the way they've taken, like today's kids don't care about graphics quality at all. The graphics fidelity is not a thing anymore. The people focus on gameplay. So it is acceptable to have worlds that are very basic, made out of primitives and stuff like that. People love good animation for characters and all that, but even that wouldn't be as necessary. But you don't need to do a photorealistic world. That's not going to sell your game. If you look at the popular games at Roblox, all the focus is in gameplay and the social interactivity, not about how great your game looks like. And I love that because obviously it's so much easier for the UGC folks when they don't need to build it's so expensive and so difficult to start building whole worlds that look like we're not quite there with AI yet, but we don't have to be yet. Yeah. Sorry to keep going on, but I'm very passionate about this subject because I've been thinking a lot.
No. And these are the interesting things of like where we differ and where we're exploring things. Because your point, there's no rule book, there's no known good here. We're all just exploring in the dark, trying to find the different paths through. One thing that you mentioned during that last bit of conversation is you're like, oh, this year's version. And I know that you've had a few different iterations of Bitmagic. My first exposure was the really cool video that I think you were taking around GDC 2024, I want to say, where it's like you type in the prompt and then all these blocks would fall from the sky and assets would fall from the sky. And it was like really well done, get your attention video that really introduced me to Bitmagic and the company. But then I know that you had a playtest version on Steam, that you had some live players get in and play. And then I know that you did Bitmagic Mini, which was more of a web-based thing. And I think that was up to now has been like from the Steam version to now has been like that was version 2 maybe, and now it sounds like you have something on the horizon that you're really excited about. And so I'm wondering if you could just ground us in what have been the generations of Bitmagic and what are the big changes. Was it just Steam to web to something more exciting soon, or like how do you guys think about that?
Oh yeah, the whole journey. The very first version was made with Unreal Engine, and then the next one is made with Unity. The first version that we released was Unity version, but we built the whole thing first in The very first version that got us funding was made with Unreal Engine, and there was at some point a little bit of confusion with our investors because they thought we're using Unreal. No, we're not. We're using Unity. So that was like Unreal Engine is really cool and extremely powerful, but then most of the bloat that it contains is the editing tools. And when you generate everything procedurally, you don't use the editors. You can't use. There's nothing you can do with those. So we realized that everything is slow, like the build process, everything is slow.
I'm very familiar with the build process for Unreal.
Yeah. For no reason at all, because we don't use those tools. If you compare Unity and Unreal Engine side by side, then actually the biggest difference by far is the tools. You can do a lot of stuff with Unity. There are some differences, like Unreal has Nanite, and it has some really cool stuff there. But by far, the biggest difference is the editing tools. Like that is where Unreal is much light years ahead. But when you cannot use those tools, actually the iteration cycle is so much faster with Unity. So we moved over there. And then when we went from the release was in Steam, but at some point we started seeing that like the Steam audience wasn't very receptive for AI content at the time. They were a little bit hostile. So we felt we probably need to expand the audience, like maybe to the mobile, but we don't want to really start making like a multiple SKUs. So then actually the whole idea to go to the web and do the mini was an accident, because I was like, what a great way to get more users, more exposure to us would be to make an ad, like playable ad, where you can create a character with this web little widget thing. And so we did that, like a WebGL version where you can only create a character. But then everybody was so excited about that. Like people thought that's the new version, so we made it be. We called it Mini because obviously at first, it was our first ever WebGL app. So it was kind of like, we don't know what to do. There's a lot of limitations. So let's only make very tiny experience with this. The prompt was like, describe your character. And then we create your character, but then we also create a game around that thing. And it's like very much an iterative process where our mesh generation, as you said, like quality, you said quality is not there. I say it's there now, but when we started this thing, it wasn't. So we felt like how can we make something where the character is the main thing when the character doesn't look good? Like and the mesh gens of 1 year ago, right?
Right.
So low quality. And so the idea was that we just have a character and a game around it, but then the characters look so ugly that we had to take the camera a little bit further away, and then we have to build a little game around it too. And after the fact, it's always like easy to say you should have done something else, but
this is great.
Just went that way.
Totally understand the process. Yeah. It's great.
So it's like we went that route, and we ended up then spending a lot of effort into making a better character thing. I was like super optimistic. I thought we can be done by February, and we got it out at Gamescom 2 weeks ago. So it took a little bit. It's actually a very difficult problem, especially the rigging and animating and all that. But so the whole year we were hoping like, once we get better looking characters, then we can take the camera closer and then we can do different things. But then at some point, because we have maybe 1 million users this year through the platform. So we've got like a whole bunch of data. We started seeing that it's not just about the character quality. There's like other things that come to play. Like you make a web app with Unity, then Unity is huge.
Yes.
And it takes a while to load it. And after it's loaded to your Android phone, which is maybe 3 years old or something like that, it takes quite a while to compile the WASM, the WebAssembly. And by the time it's finally ready to play the game, the user has already shut down the app. So we got a terrible bounce rate there. So a lot of people were interested to try out, but they couldn't wait to the end. At the end, we decided we're going to have to get out of Unity. Do you want to talk about that? Because
I want to talk about this because
I don't know. Like, are we going?
No, we're totally okay. I know we're going to get back to AI. I promise. Anyone listening, we're going to get back to it. I have plenty of AI questions for Jani, but we need to talk about the web thing here for a second. Okay, because some other context. So we also use Unreal, right? We've used Unreal. We use Unreal. We could talk about Unreal forever, but multiple times this year, I have used a whole weekend thinking, man, do I just want to rewrite everything to use WebGPU? I don't know, maybe. Because you look at what's happening with Discord, right? We've got some great friends and colleagues that I respect that are doing stuff on web, some great experiments out there. I look to some folks, there's another company that we have some friends with called Mythica. They're doing some interesting experiments. And like it feels, and I've seen some other demos, some of which are Unreal Unity based. But when you get past, you're like, all right, I'm just going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to do it myself. I think the trouble that we have is I think it's just there enough you can start to see it, but it is not trivial yet. There is a lot to do. And so I will admit, I have seriously considered at times, and I have not done it because we got other things to do, of just being like, I'm just going to rewrite everything so we can just compile straight to WebGPU or something like that. I don't know. Sometimes I think the future's there. Other times I'm like, it's not like I'm going to get Nanite to run on WebGPU or something easily.
Do you need that?
And so anyways, that's where I'm coming from. And this has definitely been a topic of conversation amongst many engineers and game developers I've talked to. I think a lot of folks are on the fence and can see it, but aren't quite there. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, before summer, we hired this like brilliant Unity engineer on a gig to just help us make things faster. And he was able to get things quite a bit faster, so we can load up much faster than we could. It's amazing that Unity makes it so hard. Like you would think that it would be out of the box, like that should be their thing, but it isn't. But then the final thing, like I haven't been happy with the level of freedom you have when you create games in Bitmagic, because it's been like we had a thing, we had a Lua running there, so AI writes Lua. And then the Lua basically cannot do anything unless it's also supported on the C# side in the Unity. Right. So we'd have to have this API where, you can move your character, you can rotate, you can change color, you can do all the things. And the game logic obviously runs that side. But then all the time, the AI would want to do something that
you don't have over there. Yes.
Which sucks. It's very limited. Like it's... And I was very frustrated. And then I don't know why it took me so long, but then at some point I realized, what? If this whole thing was running on TypeScript on a web app, I could just write the whole script
thing.
There's just everything. And we wouldn't have to wait for Unity to load up. Mm-hmm. We would have complete freedom to do anything we want. Yeah. And then it was pretty clear that we're going to have to do this. But it took surprisingly long time for me to understand that, because the way we started from was that, okay, there's Roblox uses Lua. That seems like a great way to contain the user-made edits into something safe, because obviously we can't allow users to create C# because then they can format somebody's hard drive and all those horrible things. Even if that wasn't an issue, then there is no way right now in Unity to build C# in real time in a client app.
Right.
You need to have Unity running and you need to then build it. So and actually, if anyone from Unity is listening, why aren't you doing something about that? Because I think they do all this cool AI stuff, but they don't address the elephant in the room, which is that you need to be able to have AI write code in real time. You have to... 2026 is almost here.
Don't say that. Let's not say that. That part I'm not okay with. All the rest of it is great.
Yeah. Okay. So it's still a long time before 2026 comes. But like seriously, the possibilities, like we already have the So if this mini experiment was version 2, so then we have version 3 internally, and it's just so much fun because you can do anything you want, and it's not like I'm hoping we can get that for users before Christmas, maybe, whatever. At least it's going to be pretty quickly in some sort of like a friends and family type of testing. It really becomes possible to start like designing your games because you can do anything you want. It's not about whether or not I was thinking of an API and put it in for you. No, you can do anything you want. And because it's TypeScript, it's safe. It's basically, you can't really... You can lock up the browser and then they close the tab and that's it. So inherently, there isn't really anything bad they can do with it. It's real-time script, so nothing to build, nothing to compile. It's pretty perfect. And it's crazy because earlier this year I was thinking like, are we going to have to invent our own scripting language because the Lua is so limited and all that? And I don't know why I didn't think of this. It's silly. Sometimes afterwards, it's so clear, but when you are so locked into this is the engine we're running on, so we have to be constrained with what you can do with this engine. And the idea that we would, in the life cycle of this, we would do another engine jump because we went from Unreal Engine to Unity and then Unity to Web. So it sounds a little crazy, right? But I think this is it's the evolution of AI, and like everything has happened so fast.
Yeah, I know Carl and I have talked about this. To what degree is web a future for games? Again, arguably, and in a way, way beyond what we were able to do with Flash games and stuff like that in the past. And I think a lot of us who have done AA games for a long time have dismissed the web as a platform because it's pretty limited in what we could do. And I don't know. I think it's a different distribution platform.
And I think my biggest reason for leaning into it has been that part of it, right? If we look at the landscape of games right now, so let's not even talk about AI in games specifically, let's talk about games broadly, right? Discovery and distribution is a huge challenge. And part of the reason why it's a huge challenge is because the platforms are quite limited, right? Like you have one Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, arguably, iOS, Android, and like those are all each their own walled gardens with their own special ways of doing distribution and discovery. And it all doesn't work. But what's been breaking through is where games are really shareable, where they're very easy to discover, where it's I'm interested in a game and I can jump it. To your point, the playable ad, where it's like I can just get a taste of this game immediately. I don't have to go to a platform and install it and run it, and then like from those places, other people in our space, Death by AI and these other things, looking at Discord, looking at web versions, and even where it is on Steam, it's just functionally a compiled browser window that runs the web game, but you install it via Steam. Great. And it makes me I don't know, I don't think it's going to be for every game, but I think there is something powerful there on the distribution side.
There is, and it also has its problems. Part of that has to do with the fact that it's still in the infancy of, fortunately, WebGL and WebGPU are cross-compatible, so you don't need to do two different apps. But when we first put it out, like I said, this is our first WebGL app. So we put it out and we started looking at stats, and they were like, we got this spreadsheet of 3,000 different phone models that it had to be played on. And yeah.
Sorry.
No, I remember that hell from my PopCap days.
Yeah, it's coming back. But so then you see there are phones that have, say, a 500 people tried out, and none of them ever started a game. That's what's going on here. It turned out that there are some chipsets where if you turn on full screen anti-aliasing, the screen goes blank. It doesn't crash, so you don't get any log. You just basically, users don't see anything, so they go away. All these kind of a fun little things that you only find out when you try it out. You put it out there, and then you start collecting metrics, and you find out that, okay, we need to detect that, okay, if we are running on this chipset, then we need to not do this full screen anti-aliasing. And there's a bunch of things that you need to check for and find out, and I'm sure there's plenty more. As every time we use new graphics effect or shader or whatever, we are not sure if it's going to work. So it's not so easy. It's so much easier to be on, say, iOS, because things just work. And once it works, Apple checks, you pass that, you can pretty much be sure that it runs on all the phones. And the distribution is good. You want people to pay money for you, then they can. Right. And it's all those things are mature. They work. On the website, it's a Wild West. And so I'm not saying that it's necessarily a better or even the future. It may turn out that it's like Linux or something like that, where it's a nice idea, but it doesn't become popular. Very well possible. But I think right now, because of the limitations of real-time editing of code, web is super interesting as a platform, because that allows you to do things you maybe can do in 3 years' time on these other platforms, but right now you can't. And we want to be able to try out, because our mission is partially on to find what can you do on with AI that you couldn't do before? Maybe we can invent new ways of gaming and all that. So we don't want to wait until these platforms mature. Right now, we also are too small of a team that we don't want to have multiple SKUs. We just want to focus on one platform and take the pain of the immaturity of the actual platform.
Yeah, I know. So getting back to the AI side.
Oh yeah.
No, so one of the issues, to be very frank, and this is also tangent, not completely tangential, but with the AI games, is if I want to use a coding assistant, it's a lot easier to use a coding assistant against something like a web TypeScript kind of application than against Unreal. There's some Unreal MCP servers and some other stuff, but Unreal is not designed to be like the kind of coding agents we have right now don't interact with Unreal all that easily. Now that will change, to your point, but it's gonna take a while. Now,
Very true.
Now I want to make sure that we've covered a couple of AI things before we go. I want to make sure I'm clear on your use of AI, and yeah, I don't want to make too many assumptions. But if I were to hear that, it's like, all right, you're using AI in the, like, if I'm a user of Bitmagic, the AI comes into play when I'm creating the game. But once the game is running, am I also still using machine learning or AI during the runtime of the game?
Currently not when you are a user is playing it. If you are the creator, then the V2 is one shot and then that's it.
Right.
V3 is, as a creator, you create a game and then you can iterate as much as you want. Basically, like remix your own game. Like you can keep saying whatever you want, add this, change that, until you're happy with it. And that's all AI. We currently don't do the real-time AI, though I really want to do some stuff. Like I want to do like scribble knots, or because that's where it starts getting interesting. It's just that we have to cover the bases first. We have to get everything working. But I think when it starts, I think the dullest idea is to use AI as a chatbot.
Right.
Because you can chat with ChatGPT. Don't bring those in the games. If I do a chat with AI, I want to do multiple choice. Even if AI creates that, I want to do multiple choice. I don't want to start having a conversation with an AI, because for many reasons. But so I want to find more clever ways of embedding real-time AI in the games where it actually brings more depth to the game. And I think Scribblenauts is my favorite examples of what I've come up so far. Like Scribblenauts obviously was not done with LLMs. It's an old game, but it's a miracle of its time. It's fantastic work. But what you could do today is you could have AI come up with a puzzle, and then you give a solution, and then you have AI judge your puzzle, so that it's not black and white. It's not binary. It's like you could have creative solutions. If there is like, that's a puzzle that, hey, there is a horse that's hungry, what are you going to do? And then you come up with, I want to give it ice cream. Then the AI will probably judge whether or not it's a good idea to do that. But so that it's not always give it a carrot, or like you can go beyond that, and then you can start, it can maybe educate you and say, horses actually can't handle cold stuff and all that. It could very well be like a super interesting experience where the AI almost educates you with the whether or not you got it right. That's one way, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Whether, I don't know if we can do that for V3, maybe it's going to be V4, but give our users the ability to use AI in real time for that kind of inference. I think by the time we get to V4, we'll have LLMs running in local computers. So like the cost is not going to be an issue. On Android phones, you can now use like Gemini Nano. So you can do inference in real time on your phone for simple tasks like this. So yeah, I think that's going to be very fascinating. But we don't do it now. That's a short answer is, no, we don't do that.
No, but like I think each of our various studios that are, again, exploring this dark room and finding the space ends up focusing a little bit on different parts. And we haven't played at all with that sort of have a player be able to create dynamic rule sets in the same way that you guys are looking at. What we ended up playing a lot with is exactly what you're talking about, of how do you bring that sort of magic of Scribblenauts into the game and let players have creative solutions that weren't necessarily the lock-in key. It's not just only the red key fits the red lock, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of what we did with Retail Mage, where as you're solving issues for, or like finding the right item for customers, it's not about like they want exactly this item. It's they want something in this space to solve their need, and then they leave you a Google review at the end that tells you how well you did, and so you can learn like what do they like and what don't they like. And we find all the time when we watch people play, people are solving these customer needs with things that we've never seen before because they're just thinking about the problem differently than we are, and that's the magic. But to your point, like that's its own whole endeavor of how do you apply LLMs in real time to do that kind of gameplay. That is its own work set that, to your point, like maybe V4, you'll take on that additional workload and problem set in addition to the one that we haven't taken on that you have of like, okay, how do I go prompt to game mechanics go, right?
Yeah, totally. I think we all are like solving the same problems, but because there's so many problems to solve, you have to choose your battles. And like I could see there's still quite a long time until this all is solved, which makes it very exciting. And I really, it almost feels like when the 3D cards started to become popular, and you could make games that you couldn't do before. And every year, new cards bring something new. Like right now, the new models improve so much. So it feels like right now the AI is, it's kind of distracting in a way that you think you have a plan, and then somebody brings out a new model, and you're like.
So actually, on that point, because we've had some experiences like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you, like Carl and I, really come from the game industry, right? That's primarily your background, right? So the machine learning side, do you have like experts on your team? Like, what was it like to bring that in? Do you like run your own models? I'm curious from your perspective, what's it been like to come from, because we've had a lot of guests on who are like from the AI ML side, and they're like, okay, I got to figure out what games are. But then there's some of us on the other side who are like, wait, okay, what's this machine learning thing? And so I'm curious a little bit about what that journey is, and also to the degree you can share, how are you guys, have you had to do your own fine tuning or models? Have you had to get that detailed, or have you been able to like partner with certain vendors or models, and that's where you're at this stage?
Yeah, so my history is in games, and actually game engines too, all the way 32 years ago. I did do some AI stuff before that, like coincidentally, some 6-7 years ago, I had an idea of using reinforcement learning to create a game, how do you gamify machine learning? The idea was that, hey, you have a robot that doesn't know anything at all, but it has the ability to learn. And then you can start beating it up. And it will learn from you until you can't beat it anymore, because then it'll fight back. And at that time, you will take the robot to an online arena where it's going to fight against robots trained by other people. Mm-hmm. But then you can't control it anymore. It's all about your training. I thought that would be a very fun way of like a gamifying the process of learning. Unfortunately, at that time we didn't have LLMs, or probably there would have been, but I didn't know about them, like GPT-1 type of thing. Reinforcement learning in itself requires a lot of repetition and large data sets to really learn. So that turned out to be quite a difficult to gamify, such that it would actually be a good game. And actually we did get a deal to make the game for Stadia, but then
Stadia. So that's what you have to say.
So for various reasons, that game never happened. But so I did a lot of time researching reinforcement learning. And unfortunately, I have a very good friend who works at Google. We used to work together at Westwood Studios back in the day. And he told me a lot of stuff, very useful stuff at that time. And I obviously nobody knew that LLMs are coming later on. So I didn't know how useful it is to know a little bit about this thing. We have our lead AI guy in the team. He founded a company back in the day, like many years, like 3 decades ago in Finland, called Hybrid Graphics, which was then acquired by NVIDIA. And then NVIDIA turned that into NVIDIA Finland office. And it is the office that designs all the most advanced AI chips these days. We have some heritage on that side. So he obviously no longer works there, but then he's one of us, and he's doing like extremely cool AI stuff. Like he's out of this world. So many of our cool stuff originated from him, and then we took over and then finally productized those things. So we have like our own AI lab led by him, and then we let him do what he wants to do because, as we all know, like nobody really knows a lot about AI. So it's better to not try to pretend that we know and make a plan and then try to implement that. It's rather like he's just researching stuff and like doing cool things. So we are fortunate enough to have a like very deep AI understanding in-house and like a long history of making games. I think most companies in this industry are either PhDs who do amazing AI stuff, or they are game developers who do great games. But then having both of those under the same roof is fairly unique.
Yes, I agree with you on that part. Yeah, because one of the things that I had found when we had started Jam and Tea, because I come from a technical background in and out of games actually, and have had some experience with ML, usually how it interfaced with recommender engines, like on and other stuff we would have done with like big data. And but that said, when we started keeping my kind of my game product hat on, I had told Carl, I'm not going to fine tune a model. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do anything. Not going to need it. No, let's not get too deep. Let's see what we can do with that. Next thing I know, we're way deep on the AI side and the ML side. And part of it was, now I don't know if this will be true in a few years, but the thing I keep telling people today, and I'm obviously biased, I'm curious your thought, is that if you are doing this today, you better be prepared to be on the cutting edge of the AI ML side to be able to achieve what we want to do today. It doesn't mean you can't get a great prototype out. I think people can build a great prototype, but if you wanted to like take it to production, you want to really get a finished product out, I think you probably need some amount of AI and ML expertise. In a couple of years from now, maybe we figured out enough patterns. Maybe there's some products out there or libraries where it won't be as necessary. But for today, like for us to be able to get like the costs down to what we need to do to real-time AI and to be able to get everything we need out of a model, we had to get more sophisticated on the ML side than I had anticipated originally. And we're lucky to have an ML expert on our team, but I'm curious if that's how I feel. I don't know if you give people similar advice or you think differently.
Yeah, like we try to use off the shelf as much as we can.
Yeah, agree, right?
And then focus on only those problems that really need solving.
Yep.
And me and like we have a CTO with him, like the two of us are working, like we built all the core stuff. I live in Texas and he lives in Helsinki. So we do like sometimes this kind of like a 24-hour shift thing where it's like when I go to sleep, I just hand over whatever I'm doing.
Right.
So neither of us have like very deep understanding of AI, but we both are like generalists that we worked like very hard programming problems over the years, and we can take on anything, which is great because I think when you're too deep into the AI side, you also don't necessarily think of the practical implementations as much.
Yes.
So I think we are great at products. We just, wherever you can go, it doesn't matter how clean the code is at first. You first need to build something that works and use the models the way you work. If you need to fine tune, you fine tune. If you don't, like basically do whatever seems to make sense right at that moment and don't really think too much about it. Once you have the up and running and then you have other people try it out, then you figure out if that's something that you should clean up or just whatever you do. That's the approach we take, and it works extremely well. We often have to throw away a whole pile of code, but that's okay because we had the mindset that if it doesn't work, we throw it away. It's the worst thing for developers, and this has nothing to do with AI. It's for all the developers is that you get married to your code and you don't want to throw it away when you should. Obviously this year has shifted a lot because now we have Claude 4 and we have like finally we can actually use AI to write production code, which some people probably still don't agree with. But I think if you know what you're doing and you're a good enough engineer, then you can use AI to do production code today. You just see what it does. But yeah, so I think the way we do it is not too far from probably what you guys do. So we try to use whatever is available off the shelf. We are pretty experienced programmers. So if something needs to be done, we can do that. But we don't want to spend time like trying to reinvent something that we know will be solved pretty soon. If you say, try to fine tune a model and try to solve something, then before your fine-tuning is finished, it's possible there's a new model out there that already
Yep.
does what you're trying to do.
Yep.
Waste of effort.
Yep.
That's why the fine-tuning is like very, I don't know, we do that, but mostly in the cases where we want to teach it stuff that we know most likely is not going to happen.
Right.
For
It's
example,
very specific to your application, right?
yeah. For example, what are important things in when you code a game, and the dynamics of character movement and all those kind of things, where we could start with a template and then we gradually use fine-tuning to teach the AI the template until we can take out the template, because now it knows when you're asking for a specific type of game, it knows the basics of that. And that, I think, is a good application, because it's almost for sure that none of the big AI companies are training for that right now, and not in the near future. But when you try to solve, like a lot of people make the mistake of trying to solve problems that will be math, for example, like it's obvious that it will be solved. It was never going to be a case where they wouldn't fix that AI can't do math. So I don't know. That's our approach, is try to be smart, always on the cutting edge, and taking shortcuts wherever you can, and hacking around limitations. So many times we've seen something cool and there's no API, so we build our own API, hack their website or whatever, just so we can try it out. It's not that we couldn't do that in a commercial product, but for us, it doesn't make sense for us to wait if we can just try out. And then we build our own API, we hack into that, we figure out how it works. If it works for us, then we contact them and propose that we work something together. And be like smart, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like we could talk for hours, but unfortunately, it turns out podcasts don't usually go that long. So we do need to wrap up here. But before we close out, if someone heard something that they thought was really cool and want to follow up with you or check out Bitmagic, where should they go to check that stuff out or reach out to you?
Yeah, so it's at bitmagic.ai. Very simple. Mm-hmm. There's nothing to install even, so you can just go to our website and click and play. Like it doesn't get easier than that.
Awesome. Thank you, Jani, for joining us. Really enjoyed the conversation, and it's always a pleasure to see you and hang out with you. And
likewise.
We'll catch you next time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to the full episode. We really hope you enjoyed the discussion. It would help us out a ton if you subscribed to the show on your platform of choice, as well as shared it with folks you think would find it useful. You can always check out playingwithinference.com to get in contact with us, join our Discord, or just find the links to the episodes. See you next week.